With green tournaments starting up next week, what are some green decks you should be thinking about taking? Let's discuss. Before we go into the deep dive for this deck and all decks this week, I've been theory crafting, but I have not had the time to test. These are just options to consider, as remember, every card in the deck must be green or part green. With that in mind, first up on my radar is Tyrannomon. Green decks typically excel at building wide, but one thing that you can easily do to deal with such decks is Pomumon from BT9. This floodgate is going to be exceptionally brutal, and you'll need to get rid of this Digimon if you want to be able to build wider boards in the case of Rosemon or Bloom Lordmon, or even use your Fortitude in the case of Heavy Leomon. Because these decks are pretty well known at this point, I'm looking at a lot of janky builds. With Tyrannomon, my suggested deck is going to be Tyrannomon. The main reasoning here is that in combination with Tyrannomon, you can draw in combination with your main effect that lets you play Taiga for 1 memory, since the reduction is 2 memory. If you're not a fan of draw power, Nyaromon from EX5 is probably the best bet, since you can get the plus 1000 DP when you attack, and maintain it through your opponent's turn. As I mentioned earlier, Pomumon is going to be your primary floodgate, as most decks will be looking to cheat bodies out. While true, memory gain is another problem, 2 Tyrannomons from BT3 fulfill this, as most players will probably be using agility trainings, and there's no floodgate in green that stops that. Floodgates aside, you have BT11 Agumon as a way to find your green tamers, and the MVP of all green decks moving forward, starter deck 17 Tyrannomon. Both provide DP buffs, while Tyrannomon has the superior effect of cheating out your tamers for a reduced cost by 2. As mentioned with Tyrannomon, this results in a draw 1 for simply 1 memory. Moving to level 4s, you won't have access to EX1 Tyrannomon as this Digimon is red, but you can still utilize BT11 for playing your tamers with a play cost of 3 or less without paying the cost. Luckily, with Tyrannomon, you're not as dependent on this specific Digimon anymore. Instead, you can go a little bit more aggro with the promo and the newest BT14 variant for Digivolution cost reduction. Not to mention, its end of turn effect that lets you attack. For level 5s, this is a little interesting. On one end, you could prioritize BT8 Master Tyrannomon for aggro shenanigans, while with BT11, it provides you a little bit more control. Personally, I like BT11 because this is the only way for you to avoid security effects if you're going for the beat over. Though keep in mind, BT2 Taiga does give you piercing. This does leave 2 slots for BT2 Tyrannomon, simply for its cheaper Digivolution cost. Top end wise, you utilize 4 RustTyrannomon Ace for the Blast Diva surprise, and suspending all of their Digimon with DP less than or equal to this Digimon. In combination with BT11 metaltyrannomon, that's 2 cards you could potentially trash on the deletion of one of your opponent's Digimon in battle. Lastly, with BT11 RustTyrannomon, you can get an extra attack with its effect. Though I didn't bring it in for this specific deck profile, you could utilize the BT2 RustTyrannomon as well, though personally it feels a little antiquated at this point. And of course, when going for the top end, there are a few options as well. Top end wise, there's Quartzmon and Quantumon. Quartzmon is best for locking the board, because in the end, if this is going to be the most popular Digimon to play top end wise, prepare for board locks that lead to a potential deck out. Quantumon is good if you're going for the prediction game, but alas, I prefer Quartzmon for this specific build. Option wise, this deck tends to lean more aggro than defensive, so in my mind, find your pieces. And in this format, because there's no way to stop the agility trainings from going off, it's relatively safe to run this at 4 to find any of your Digimon or tamers. In my mind, all of it's a win. You may find it interesting I don't run green memory boosts, nor do I run hidden potential discovered. In my mind, this green deck tends to build more linear stack, meaning you can set up traps with your level 5s before blast evoing for some major damage. Because you are more stack based and not building wide, this is where HPD in my mind isn't as important. Your last 8 slots go to 4 each of the Taigas, one of which can reduce the Digivolution cost of your Tyrannomons by 1, and one that gives plus 1000 DP and further reduces it by 1 if you're Digivolving into a level 5 or higher Digimon. Keep in mind, the first Taiga also gives piercing, which can be very helpful, especially if you're going for extra checks. Bottom line though, I heavily expect Heavy Leomon, Bloom Lordmon, and Rosemon to be major contenders in this format. But with BT9 Pomumon, this floodgate stops most of these decks cold as they can't go wide or play back from the deletion of Fortitude. As I mentioned, this deck is simply experimental, but I did want to put this on people's radars as they get ready for green tournaments in March. What's your opinion of Tyrannomon, and do you think it could be competitively viable for this specific format? Let me know your thoughts as tomorrow hits another green contender. This is DIGI-PANDA, logging out.